Hello and welcome to The Critique. Today we are dissecting a lecture slide deck called Mastering the Art of the Personal Statement, which is designed for an English 100 class.
It's a really dense deck. There are some ambitious frameworks in here, but I think ambitious might actually be a stumbling block for new writers if we're not careful.
Precisely. So let's get right to it. We're going to move through this presentation slide by slide in order just to see if we can optimize the instruction.
I'm ready. Let's pull up that first section.
Okay, starting with slides 1 through 3. The presentation establishes the personal statement as a hybrid of narrative, descriptive, and persuasive elements, but I feel the relationship between them needs a much sharper definition.
Yeah, I'm looking at slide 3, at that Venn diagram. It's got 3 equal-sized overlapping blobs for narrative, descriptive, and persuasive.
And visually, it's green, I get it, but I worry about the logic it implies.
Right. By making them all the same size, it suggests the writing process is like a recipe. 1 cup of story, 1 cup of description, 1 cup of argument.
That's the core weakness right there. It could mislead a student into thinking they need to tell a story just for the sake of it.
Instead of understanding that persuasion is the goal.
Exactly. The narrative and the description, those are just the methods you use to get to that goal. A personal statement isn't a memoir.
No, it's an argument wrapped in a story. If a student gets too focused on that narrative blob, they end up, what, entertaining the admissions officer?
But without actually proving they're ready for college? So our suggestion here is to shift the hierarchy. Emphasize that the essay is fundamentally an argument persuasion, just disguised as a story.
Okay, so how do we make that actionable for a freshman?
I think we just tweak the explanation in the notes. We could say something like, you are not just telling a story for entertainment, you are curating a specific memory to prove a specific trait.
The story is the vehicle, but the argument is the destination.
Much sharper. And, speaking of persuasion, I'm looking at slide 2. It uses the analogy of a sales pitch. It literally says, you are the product.
Ooh, yeah. That phrasing makes me a little uncomfortable. I mean, it's accurate in a marketing sense, I guess, but sales pitch?
It just leads students toward what I'd call braggadocio. It encourages them to sound arrogant.
Right, like a late-night infomercial. We want them to be confident, not sleazy.
So let's refine that. Instead of sales pitch, let's suggest a different term. Maybe evidence-based advocacy?
Evidence-based advocacy. I like that. It feels much more appropriate for an academic setting.
It tells the student, prove the real you exists beyond the transcript numbers, but do it with evidence, not just hype. It changes the whole mindset from selling to proving.
Okay, good. Moving on to slide 4. We've got this visual of a road splitting into 2 paths.
Right. It's distinguishing between broad and comprehensive prompts, like tell us about yourself, and specific and narrow ones, like how will you advance our mission?
The distinction is useful, for sure, but the binary, fork-in-the-road presentation, it risks oversimplifying the strategy.
Let's look closer at that fork. By splitting them visually, it really implies the writing process is completely different for each.
And that's a trap. It totally overlooks that the specific prompts still need that broad context of the applicant's character to really work.
Oh, absolutely. If I just take that specific path and list, say, 5 ways I'll advance the mission.
You've answered the question, technically.
But I haven't written a personal statement. I've written a business plan, not an essay.
So the suggestion is to introduce a new concept, maybe something like the pivot for specific prompts.
The pivot. I like that. It bridges the gap.
So a concrete example would be,
You advise the user to explain that even on that specific path, say describing a time you helped the community, the writer has to pivot back to the broad theme of their own personal values.
right, so I organize this food drive, and this demonstrates my core value of servant leadership, which I will bring to your campus.
Precisely. The critique has to note that answering only the specific question is a trap. The roads shouldn't diverge. They need to merge.
Okay, let's transition to the preparation phase. This is the tri-zone framework on slides 5 and 6. Past, present, future.
The tri-zone framework gives a solid chronological anchor, but the relevancy rule they introduce in Zone 1 needs a lot more nuance. It risks stifling creativity.
I see the example on slide 6. It's for a STEM scholarship application. It gives a green check mark to spearheading the robotics team.
And a big red X to award for playing trumpet in band.
Wow. That is incredibly reductive.
That's the weakness. It's just too binary. It unintentionally teaches students to discard any unique parts of their personality if they don't explicitly match the major.
It creates robots. I'm an engineer, therefore I only do engineering things. But isn't the whole point of a personal statement to show you have some dimensionality?
Exactly. So the suggestion is to refine that relevancy rule. It needs to focus on transferable skills, not just topical matches.
Okay, so how do we save the trumpet player?
We challenge the presenter of this lecture to explain how band could be relevant to STEM if it's framed correctly.
Well, there's recognizing mathematical patterns in music, or just the sheer discipline of practicing an instrument.
Yes, the concrete advice should be, don't delete the trumpet, reframe it. Does the discipline of music make you a better engineer?
That is so much stronger. It shows a student who can actually synthesize different parts of their life, which is exactly what colleges are looking for.
Okay, now let's move to Zone 2 on Slide 7, the present. The slide has a picture of a runner, and it talks about addressing gaps. Bad grades, gap years.
And the headline here is, focus on the solution, not the problem.
The advice in Zone 2 about addressing gaps is crucial, but focusing so heavily on the solution might obscure the necessary context of the struggle.
I see what you mean. The slide basically says to ignore the problem, which, is good advice to avoid whining, but if a student glosses over the problem too quickly...
The solution has no weight. There's no narrative arc. If you just say, I fixed my grades, without explaining why they fell in the first place, the reader doesn't feel that triumph.
So what's the fix?
We modify the advice. Change it to briefly contextualize, then solve.
We probably need a formula for that, or students are just going to ramble on about their problems.
Good point. Let's suggest a 20-80 rule. Spend 20% of your word count explaining the obstacle honestly, my mother was sick, or I just didn't know how to study, and then 80% on the redemption arc.
That's actionable. It forces them to be brief, but also honest. What about this other bullet point here? Beyond expectations. It just says to do more than required.
That's way too vague. For a novice student, doing more could just mean showing up to class every day.
Right. We need to critique that bullet point and ask for some concrete examples.
Yeah, like doing more means organizing a study group, not just attending one. It means creating a resource, not just reading one.
Got it. Okay, let's look at the structure section on slide 9, the blueprinting slide.
Right. It offers 3 organizational structures: the visionary, the problem solver, and the classic.
Offering 3 structures is excellent, but it's missing something, like a difficulty rating for new writers.
That is a really insightful point. The visionary structure, starting with the future.
And the problem solver, starting with the present conflict.
Those are high-risk moves.
They absolutely are. And the weakness here is that the slide presents them like they're all equal options on a buffet. But starting with the future, the visionary, can feel so abstract and untethered if it's not done perfectly.
It usually just sounds like daydreaming. And the problem solver?
That requires immediate tension. If you don't have a genuine red flag like a GPA dip, trying to use that structure feels like you're just manufacturing drama.
So the suggestion is to add a risk assessment? Or maybe a specific user profile for each structure?
Exactly. We need to guide them a bit more. So for a concrete example, we could advise that the visionary structure is best for students who have a very specific, unique career goal.
Someone who already has a patent, for example.
And the problem solver is basically mandatory for students who have those red flags they need to address immediately.
Right. And we should also warn them that the classic, just simple chronological order, is the safest and often the most effective structure for like 90% of applicants. It's not boring, it's reliable.
Speaking of reliability, let's look at the golden rule on slide 10. Show, don't tell.
The show don't tell slide uses a technical example that successfully demonstrates evidence, but it completely fails to demonstrate emotion.
Let's see the text. The strong example says, I use specific technologies, like Microsoft Lens, to digitize reading materials, reducing the cost of textbooks.
So it is specific. It names a tool. But the weakness is that it's purely functional. It shows technical competence. I know how to use a scanner, but not that character or warmth we were talking about back in slide 2.
It's just resume fodder. It's cold.
So the suggestion is to elevate that example. Show result-oriented evidence that includes a human element. We need to answer the question, who did this help?
Okay, let's rewrite it right now.
A concrete example could be, I used Microsoft Lens to digitize materials, allowing 3 visually impaired classmates to finally access the curriculum independently.
Whoa, that is a night and day difference.
You see the shift, right? Showing isn't just about naming the tools you used, it's about showing the impact those tools had on actual human beings.
That changes the applicant from a technician into a community builder. That's a massive upgrade.
Okay, now let's jump to the opening hook section on slides 11 and 12. The slide suggests using a thought-provoking moment or a quote.
And the example hook it gives is, my teacher told me, you'll regret it. That doubt became my fuel.
The section on opening hooks relies on a dramatic quote that might unintentionally pressure students into manufacturing drama.
It sets up a villain, doesn't it? The doubting teacher. Is there a risk here that this just reinforces the whole trauma essay trope?
Huge risk. The weakness is that it implies a personal statement requires a traumatic event or an enemy to be interesting. Most 17-year-olds don't have a cinematic villain, and we don't want them inventing one.
So the suggestion is to balance that dramatic hook with an example of, say, a curious hook or a quiet hook?
Exactly. Show that intellectual engagement can be just as captivating as conflict.
So for a concrete example, we could propose an alternative hook that shows curiosity. Something like, I first noticed the pattern in the fractals during a thunderstorm.
Yes, that shows you're observant. It grounds the reader in your mind, not in your trauma.
And quickly, on slide 12, red flags, it lists repeating the resume.
The cardinal sin. We need a specific exercise for this.
What do you have in mind?
A simple rule. If this sentence is also on your CV, delete it or expand it with a story.
So if the CV says captain of soccer team, the essay can't just say, I was captain. It has to tell the story of the time the team wanted to quit.
Exactly. Okay, finally, let's look at professional standards and the conclusion on slides 13 and 14.
Slide 13 introduces the nursing analogy. It asks, if a nursing applicant has typos, will they make mistakes on patient vitals? Attention to detail equals safety.
The nursing analogy for proofreading is a brilliant psychological trick that should really be applied more broadly.
It is incredibly effective. It equates typos with actual danger. But the weakness is that the slide just limits this powerful frame to the nursing field.
Right, so if I'm a history major or a business major, I might look at that slide and think, well, nobody dies if I misspell historiography, so I'm fine.
We need to close that loophole. The suggestion is to universalize the analogy. Emphasize that sloppy writing indicates sloppy thinking in any major.
Let's give some concrete examples to extend it.
For a history major, a typo isn't just a mistake, it's a factual error. It destroys your credibility as a researcher.
And for a business major, a typo in a contract is a huge financial liability.
It's about professional reliability. We need to make them feel the weight of that error, no matter what their major is.
Okay, and looking at the final checklist on slide 14, it summarizes the points well. Analyze, prompt, gather data, choose structure, draft, refine.
It's a good summary, but I feel like we're missing one final quality control check.
I agree. The suggestion is to add one final box to that checklist, the stranger test.
Okay, what is the stranger test?
You hand the essay to someone who doesn't know you, a teacher from another department, a friend of a friend, whatever. You ask them to read it and then tell you what your 3 core values are.
And if they can't do it?
Then the real you, the whole goal we established back on slide 2, is missing from the essay. It means you wrote a lot of words, but you didn't actually transmit your character.
That brings everything full circle.
So, to wrap this up, this deck has strong bones. The tri-zone framework is great. The nursing analogy is powerful. But a key theme in our critique today is that we need to humanize the process.
We need to stop treating the personal statement like it's a technical manual and start treating it like a window into a person.
Let's recap the main actionable points for the listener who sent this in.
First, reframe that hybrid model. Persuasion is the goal. Narrative is just the tool.
Second, nuance the relevancy role to allow for transferable skills. We have to save the trumpet player.
Third, add those risk ratings to the structures so students don't crash and burn on the visionary model.
And fourth, rewrite those show-don't-tell examples. Make them bleed a little. Don't just show the software you used. Show the people you helped.
Your actionable next step is to go through your examples slide by slide. Wherever you have a technical example, ask, where is the human? Wherever you have a binary rule, ask, is there a pivot?
And once you've made those tweaks, we would love to see the revised deck. Please submit it back to us for a final polish.
That's all for this critique. Keep writing and keep improving.
See you next time.